What's up guys, welcome to Threads again. We were really privileged to have a couple visit us called Set Up to Worship. They came to Coventry to help us out with guitars, and they basically are a couple of luthiers. Here's a clip of them talking about what they did to one of the acoustic guitars that was present on the day.
So first of all, I took the strings off, and I looked at the frets, and there was quite a bit of fret wear, and so I used the wet and dry sandpaper, and I smoothed out the top of the frets. I'll just show you the papers. I just restored the frets, and we start off with 400 grit paper, and then 600, then 800, then 1200, then 2000. And then we use a really fine steel wool that's quadruple O to get the shine back on the frets. But the whole idea is to restore the frets back to the rounded shape that they are, and the shape of my fingers does that all along there. I also cleaned it. I used a Stanley blade, which is this, to clean the fingerboard, because it hadn't been cleaned before properly, so I just scraped just the top of it lightly, just get the weight of the Stanley blade, get it off, so that any finger jam that was on there. So then that restored the rosewood back to the right colour and shade and everything. And then I oiled, gave it a little bit of an oil with proper Music Nomad Care oil, and that restored the moisture in the fingerboard in the rosewood. I tightened up these at the top so there won't be any vibrations, and then I handed it to Steve so he could then do the fine tuning, literally, of it, because if the frets aren't restored and crowned again, then the strings can't sit on the top of them and produce the sound that you need. So mine is all the foundational stuff. And then Steve got it, and then what did you do?
Well, the first thing I did was, because we're obviously looking for a nice low action, the first thing I did was string ramp, which was create ramps or ramparts basically from further down in the actual bridge pin hole. And what this actually does is if I lower the action or the saddle, this increases the break angle to the top of the saddle itself, so the string rises at a much lower, further down the hole. So essentially we have a steeper rise angle to the top of the saddle as opposed to this gentle, which of course doesn't drive the soundboard enough, because an acoustic guitar requires that all the takeoff points, the nut be restored, the saddle be restored with a blade and restored, and the frets be restored, so that we've got this energy takeoff point that drives the soundboard. This being a cedar top or a western red cedar top, it tends to be quite mid-rangey. So we want something that actually can really drive the soundboard, and the greater movement of the soundboard, the greater the dynamic range. So we've got much more music, and this poor girl's had a lot of love around the world, but there's many good tunes left in the year. These little surface cracks are not wood cracks. This finish is polyurethane, which is basically very thick, glad wrap, plasticized. So these are just stress fractures from the load of the bridge, because this thickness is probably, I don't know, 20 microns. It's very, very thick. And these are just load fractures. They're not damaging the guitar. They're just aesthetic at this point. There's no splits in the wood or anything, and it's had a lot of love. So I've created these string ramps, which gives a lot more release from this area of the bridge itself, which is coupled to the face. So the translation of string energy to the face at this point is critical. And that's really it, so that we get this very loud sort of release point. And I'm just going to tune it up on the strobe, because I've just tightened the truss rod. Very straight neck. I like a very straight, loaded neck. And that'll give us a much better sound. Because everything is really focused now, our tuning is critical. Everything comes into alignment and focus. And that means your intonation, the ability for the guitar to play and tune across all frets. We have a slight balancing issue here with the pickup, which we'll remedy. So it's still stretching. No effort, it's
the resonance of it.
It's just ringing. So the whole instrument now is stretched. It's what we call loaded. It's been loaded. When an instrument has too much bend or it rolls in, it's essentially not delivering the harmonic range or response that it needs to deliver. So it is really a mechanical, organic device that's designed to move the soundboard, the valve releases, and of course everything we can do to load the leading edges and the pin points or the takeoff points, and the frets must be crowned and rounded, no wear. All of these points, if they're not restored, steal string energy, and they steal it viciously, and essentially it's this translation to the soundboard is being compromised. So by restoring it, straightening up the neck and loading up the guitar, we can have any action that we essentially like, and we can have a release point.
Beautiful.
Very dynamic sound. It's a really nice intonation.